Hi, I'm author Richard Paul Evans, and this is my lovely wife, Keri.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us here in our home.
It was, oh my gosh, it was 1992. So what is that? Almost 28 years ago
Yeah.
that I first wrote this little book called The Christmas Box.
Look
This
at
is
that.
this is the one I signed to my parents.
Oh
So
my goodness.
yeah, this is one of the original 27 copies. And
Kinko's copies.
yes, and I didn't. I mean, I remember when you read it. I wasn't going to do anything with it. I had no idea that it would become what it did. Not only the number one book in the world for 6 weeks, but also that it would actually create the Christmas Box House, and that it would launch this incredible mission. So what happened when it first started? I mean, it was something very simple. I remember I gave you a copy to read, and you were terrified.
Of course. And I've been doing that for the last.
You're so
Now I'm
terrified.
doing it with our daughter too. So yeah.
Well, either we have to be good writers or she has to be a good liar, and she's not a very good liar. So,
I'm not.
so fortunately, we're okay writers. So when I wrote this book, we handed it out to neighbors. It was our little neighborhood Christmas gift, and that was it. We thought it was done, but the book had its own life, and people began requesting copies of the book, and then bookstores start calling with orders for the book. And from there, it just grew and just got bigger and bigger. And then I decided to self-publish the book, and it hit the New York Times bestseller list. And at that point, our life just kind of exploded. Keri was in bed with about to have a baby.
Yeah, I was on bed rest.
Yeah.
With Abby.
And here, I remember one time the doorbell kept ringing because publishers were sending us flowers. And she's like,
Oh yeah,
"Please."
after I had the baby.
It's like, please, no more flowers.
Our
And
house was so small we couldn't contain all the flowers.
it looked like a funeral home.
Yeah.
It was just like, it was so filled with flowers. She goes, how long will this keep up? And I said, as long as I don't sign with anyone. As soon as I sign with someone, then it's over. And so the book came out, and it sold in an auction, and it sold for more than $4 million. And at this point, we were living in a home that had 700 finished square feet.
No, it was 12.
Well, the whole thing, upstairs
Yeah.
and downstairs. So
Yeah.
it was a small little box of a home, and we were happy. It was a great house, so we were happy, and we were nervous. What's going to happen to our children? How will money affect them? And so we started talking to financial advisors, and they were saying horrible things. I mean, we go to this meeting, and they're saying, "Well, we have to set up trust so when your kids are alcoholic," or it's like, what? It's like, we did this to make a better life for our family, not worse. And then so we go out to our little minivan. And I remember the doors open, and Keri's sitting there, and I'm just standing out there. She sits on the side of the van with the door open. She goes, "Let's just give the money back."
Said no one ever.
I said, "No." I go, no, we're not. That's not going to happen. But what it did is it started a dialogue. Well, what do you do with money?
It was scary. I was afraid what was going to happen to our children.
Right.
Because you've seen so many terrible.
And we didn't want our children
Outcomes.
to be entitled or lazy,
Yeah.
and we just wanted them to have good lives. And so, in our discussion, we decided, well, why don't we show them that money is power and use it for good? And so I went to my father. I said, he's a social worker, and I said, why don't you find the answer to this question? What is the single most important thing we can do to help children who are at risk? And people always ask why children, and I said, well, the Christmas box is about the love of a parent for a child, so it just made sense. And so my dad
You wrote the book for our daughters.
exactly
It was only for them.
it was for two
Jenna
little
and
girls,
Allison.
right?
Yeah.
And so my dad went up to the University of Utah and talked to the dean up there, and he asked the question, what's the most important thing we can do to help at-risk children? And his answer surprised us. He said, I don't know. It's like, well, if you don't know, who knows? And he said, let's bring everyone involved and ask that question. So the first thing we did is we sponsored a conference, and we brought in all the people who deal with child advocacy, and we asked them one question: what's the most important thing we can do to help children who are at risk? And the answer to that was the Christmas Box House, and that's why we're here tonight. This is where it all started. This is where it began. Now, that's where it started, but the early years were miserable. In fact, the first 4 years, I regretted every single day. And it was it must have been hard. I mean, you saw what I was going through, and Keri and her generosity, we're burning through money like crazy because we're the only ones funding it. We're getting like $10 checks, donations,
Yeah.
and we're building a multi-million-dollar facility. And we had a staff of about 6, and it's like, here we are funding all this ourselves. No one's donating, and we're running out of money.
But then we did have some great donors come in.
After,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
we had some really,
After it was built, I guess.
yeah, after we had some really wonderful donors
Yeah,
who stepped in.
lots.
Yeah,
The community really stepped up, but that beginning part
the
was,
first 4 years, it wasn't there. It was non-existent. So we had this experience once. I came home, and I'd had another bad day, and it's like, where's the money going to come from? And I remember I came in, and Keri was really upset. She saw what this was doing to me. I mean, it was one thing to be able to sacrifice all your money because we had pretty much put all of our money into it. We were now taking out loans to keep the Christmas box house going. And she saw that it was destroying me, that it seemed like no one was on our side. And we got into a fight about it. It's like, I mean, she was right. She was like, this isn't working. And no one cares. And she was right. I mean, but what do you do? It's like, no, we made the commitment. We're into it. And so I went down to my den. It was a horrible night. And I went down to my den, my man cave, to escape. And a few hours later, Keri buzzes me on the phone. She goes, our son, Michael, who was about 2 years old.
He was younger.
He was younger, about 18 months maybe, had a fever.
Yeah.
And which is always scary with a child, right? And it was like 102, 103. And then I come upstairs and we just watch him, and it gets up to 104, at which point it's like, we've got to take him to the hospital.
Yeah.
So we drive to Primary Children's Hospital. And what I left out is during that, while I'm down in my den, I just started praying. And I said, look, I can't do it without Keri. It's one thing to go in every day and get beaten up. But if this is at home, if she's not on my side with this, I can't do it. It's like, God, I believe you want me to do this. I can't do it without her. I mean, we need to be completely together. I need her support. I need her help with this, or I can't. It will fail. And it was just shortly after Michael got sick, and I thought, great, now this on top of it, our son's sick, but we go to the hospital, and it's late at night, and a lot of the hall lights were off, if you remember. It was kind of dark. We go in, and we sit down in the emergency room. We're sitting there holding our little baby. We'd been there for maybe 5 minutes when a caseworker from the state walks in holding a toddler. He was probably like 2 years old.
Yeah, maybe 2.
Who had just been beaten up. And what really struck me is that someone had pulled his hair out. It's like, could you imagine?
Big bald spots.
Yeah, there's blood on his
baby's
head.
hair, and he's just like
And
crying for his mother.
And it was traumatic. The thing that was so interesting about it is that the caseworker walks in front of us. He holds the baby maybe 6 feet in front of Keri. And, these are confidential matters, right? It was like we were invisible. He didn't look at us. He just sat there and he talked to the nurse and told her about the abuse that had taken place with his child. And of course, Keri, being the mother who she is, she's very emotional. She starts crying, and I could just see tears falling down her cheeks. And she watches this, and after the nurse leaves, I introduced myself. I said, sir, I'm Richard Evans. He goes, yeah, I know who you are. And I said, well, what are you going to do at 1 a.m. with this baby? Where do you go? And he said, well, when the doctor gives us a release, I'll start calling people and waking them up. That's exactly what he said. We'll start waking them up. And they said, if we had your shelter, that's where we would go. It would be much less traumatic. And then he walked away. And I looked over at Keri, and I just remember you just had your head down. You just like this. You had been crying.
I'm like, okay, God, got it.
Got it, yeah.
Sometimes he has to knock me over the head.
And it was so beautiful because she looked at me. She said, build the shelter. Build it.
Get it done.
I don't care. I don't care what it takes. Just get it done. And that was the moment. It was just, I realized at that moment that it was an answer. It was an answer to prayers, right? That it's like that's I couldn't do it without her. And Keri has been the backbone ever since. She has been completely supportive and 100% into making this happen, which I am forever grateful for. And now we've seen the fruits of it. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful. We see all these kids. We see them at my book signings. We see them all over. Children who are now adults. And some of them have children themselves.